There are examples that we'll get to that this has worked, but there are some egregious offenders where this is epically a disaster, and I think Rings of Power might be the flagship.
Well, the next category that you have here of girl boss is, let's see here, um, hijacking,
Yes.
recentering a side female character as the main character of a mostly male franchise. And this is the biggest offender. I'm glad you put this up here. Rings of Power.
Yeah. You take a side female character who may have been a secondary character or whatever, and you recenter the franchise on her and completely reimagine the franchise around her as the centerpiece. And there are examples that we'll get to that this has worked, but there are some egregious offenders where this is epically a disaster, and I think Rings of Power might be the flagship, or is the flagship, at least in this category. There are some other really bad ones, but they took Galadriel, who is a side character. She's kind of a variant of an Arthurian archetype. I would say she was a beloved character in the Tolkien world of Middle Earth. She was played by Cate Blanchett in the Peter Jackson trilogy, and I would say that she endeared herself to many many people with her portrayal of Galadriel. She was tempted by the ring. She has that monologue where she's like, instead of a Dark Lord, you would have a queen, terrible and as treacherous as the sea. And but she rejects it. She turns down the temptation. And so we had a really good Galadriel. She's also the storyteller to the trilogy. The whole trilogy opens up to her voiceover.
Right.
And then you got these guys who get a hold of this IP and they're like, let's take Galadriel and center the story on her. And they completely changed her character along the way. She's not a variant of an Arthurian legend in this. She's not the Galadriel from the Tolkien books. She is possibly a poster child girl boss. I mean, how much of this have you seen?
Unfortunately, I think I saw about, I want to say, maybe 6 episodes of this, which was actually 6 episodes more than I needed to see. The only thing that I liked were the dwarves. They actually seemed likable. The 2 actors who portrayed, the dwarf king, queen, they were actually very cool to see together. That was
okay.
fun watching them. But Galadriel, I remembered from the films. I didn't read the Lord of the Rings book. Sorry, y'all. I just didn't. Wasn't my thing. But I loved the movies, and I loved Cate Blanchett's portrayal of Galadriel. It was amazing how she did that, how that particular character, she didn't overpower everyone, but she was an important character, tie things, together. But she was very regal. She was very respectful. She was very knowledgeable. This one, this Galadriel, I wound up calling her like Karen Galadriel, just the most literally the poster girl for girl boss. I know everything. I know more than everything else. I can fight better than you. I can better than you. And I watched that and I'm just like, what makes you think that this is the type of female character that would appeal to people?
Yeah, So I used to do role playing games when I was a kid, like Dungeons and Dragons and Lord of the Rings.
Mm-hmm.
Like, and I had my buddies, and we would do some role playing. And I used to do a lot of DMing where I would run the show. And there was and it's funny because the player characters are always trying to get the most that they can get. And as
Mm-hmm.
the game master or the DM, you're trying to demonstrate the resistance the world would give them in the most realistic way possible. And what's funny is I've had discussions about this. I was like, if I and sometimes you get into arguments with the player characters, they get really upset. They think you're being too tough on them. And I was like, you know what? One of these days, and I'm just going to give them everything they want. Whatever you want, you win. You beat this guy. You get all the experience points. Yep, you found the treasure. You got all the experience. Yep, you climbed the mountain without a hitch. And then they realized what I was doing, so they were like, okay, you made your point. You can't just give us everything. This is what Galadriel's like. If you were to have a story where you just basically ran into zero resistance, you would be Galadriel from Rings of Power. She just wasn't. And then on top of that, you have bad writing, and I mean bad.
Yeah, that was awful.
So I watched the first 3 episodes like in earnest because remember this came out at the same time as House of the Dragon. So
yes,
you couldn't have had a better comparison if you designed one in a laboratory. You had like the same genre, right? House of Dragon, Rings of Power. You both had female-centric storytelling with, you had Rhaenyra and Galadriel. You had all the momentum of the Peter Jackson trilogy moving into Rings of Power and zero momentum feeding in from the dead Game of Thrones franchise. And yet Rings of Power pretty much fell out of the starting gate and died on the track. And House of the Dragon is still running laps with it. And it's because of the writing. The female portrayal of Galadriel was horrible and then also poorly written. So when I was watching it, I became kind of more intrigued by the badness of the writing and the storytelling. And I'm not saying this even to be funny, but like, it's like, oh my God, this is bad in a way that I rarely have seen at a production level like this. Like this dialogue, like we're talking like writing 101 mistakes, like all sorts of weird, bizarre problems. And by the way, The Acolyte has this issue as well. It's as if people without any experience came in and wrote, and they made all the amateur mistakes that hopefully you would have weeded out by the time you get a franchise like this. So anyway, it was very poorly written. And so I watched the first 3 episodes in earnest and then watched another, I think 2 or so episodes purely at that point for the sake of observing the reality of bad writing with a high budget, like what it looks like. I had like a train wreck. I had to watch it.
Yeah, I get it. I'm just like, aren't you gonna run out of money? No, apparently this is Jeff Bezos's passion project. So it's just like, just keep throwing money, into the fire. But I agree. Writing was abysmal, was just awful, and I'm just like, why do we have to suffer, through this because of how bad, just how bad it is. But
Yeah,
it's come back for a second season, and I haven't made up my mind if I'm gonna blow any brain cells.
I think it comes out next
watching it.
week, doesn't it?
Yeah, it does.
Oh man, YouTube's gonna be on fire with this one.
Yeah, I'm like, I don't want to watch it, but daggone it, I'm gonna have to, because I just, from a viewer point of view, and this is how I am, you want to write something that does not insult the intelligence of your audience, and this show is one of the biggest offenders that I've seen. I'm not a Tolkien scholar. I haven't read the books, but I know bad dialogue when I hear it, and it's, oh my gosh, it's just a mess. But I think that the guys, I don't want to speak out of turn. I think the guys doing this are buddies of J.J. Abrams, I believe.
That sounds right. I think
I'm
I
gonna
did
look
hear
that
that.
up.
From what now that you say it, yeah, I do think that this show has a writing team that kind of got bumped to the top of the queue, and
Hmm.
they shouldn't have because. And by the way, anyone's capable of bad writing. Ask any writer. There's no writer in the world, no
Hmm.
screenwriter in the world that's going to tell you that they've never had bad writing. Bad writing is just a fact of life as a writer and part of your learning curve. And that's why you want other writers around you to help you catch your bad writing. So
Right.
to literally observe that this went all the way to production and nobody stopped it in the writer's room. Nobody stopped it at the rehearsal readings. Nobody stopped it at filming. The actors didn't push back. And then it went all the way to I was like, man, this is egregious that there was no check on the writing. I don't know any other world that works like this in writing. I'm at the low end of the totem pole, and I have tons of writers that I trust around me to help me catch all the mistakes I will make when I write, in hopes that I can improve it and write something that will connect with readers. And if you don't have that, you shouldn't be a professional. I mean, it should not be in the professional realm to write like that and get it all the way into production like that, especially with this budget.
Hmm. Exactly. Well, let's move on to the
Well, did you want to
next
briefly
one.
cover a hijacking example that worked?
Oh, you know what? Yes, actually, I'm glad you keep me on point here because I actually have it brought up, but I didn't click over. And Incredibles 2. Now, I remember seeing this movie. I loved the first one. The second one, I didn't love it. I didn't hate it. It was kind of there.
Right.
And had one of the most hilarious teen angst scenes I have seen in years. I was laughing so darn hard. I think I was laughing for about 5 minutes. I just,
Yeah.
oh my gosh.
Yeah, I like you. So I think of the first Incredibles as a classic, actually, a modern day classic, and love it. So this did not hold up, I thought, to the first one. So I'm completely in agreement with you there. However, this was a blowout at the box office. So it was successful, and we have to give it that. And I would say this is a show where the male lead of the first film was largely relegated to a secondary role, and Helen Parr or Elastigirl kind of hijacked the show. This one, I think it's mostly works for a couple reasons. One, the first film, Helen Parr was a pretty big part of it. She wasn't totally, she was secondary, but like barely. So this is like a minor hijack where it flips a little bit. And it's a family superhero unit. So I think this one mostly worked, even though it kind of shifted to be focused on her. And then the other example I had in there was Finding Dory, a secondary female character who is elevated to recenter the story on. So Finding Dory is another one that did great at the box office, and I think is generally loved by audiences. And Wednesday, a new film or a show on Netflix, has been very well received. And that, again, is a secondary female character recentered on her. And it was very successful from what I've heard. I haven't seen it yet, but a lot of people seem to like Wednesday. So
I watched a couple of episodes. The first episode I wasn't really too thrilled with, but I hung in there because I loved watching the Addams Family growing up, like in syndication. And while I had issues with like Gomez, okay, granted, no one's really going to be, oh my gosh, no one's going to be Raw Julia. Okay, you're not going to capture that in the bottle. That kind of detracted a little from me. But the more episodes that we were more focused on Wednesday and how she's fitting in and not fitting in at Nevermore, I really enjoyed what I watched with that, and I'm looking
and that's
forward to season
relatable.
2.
Yeah, not fitting in, that's totally relatable,
Mm-hmm.
So you can actually have a female character hijack a franchise and it works. But again, it comes down to the writing. If you think that by hijacking a franchise you've done your job, think again. You simply hijack the franchise, and if you don't write it well, it's going to crash, and you're gonna add to the negativity behind the word girl boss.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Oh, Thor: Love and Thunder is another one that I would say is a disaster.
Oh God, that was horrible. It was so bad. It was so bad. I saw it in the movies. Bad. It was just, and it wasn't like, okay, so Thor: The Dark World, I didn't really like that when I was bored. For as much crap as people give Thor Ragnarok, I laughed so much through that. I enjoyed watching Ragnarok.
Honestly, I love Thor Ragnarok. I thought it was like, it struck the right balance of being hysterical and yet poignant and telling a Marvel story. It was a new look. I loved Jeff Goldblum in it. I loved seeing Gladiator Hulk. Like, there was a lot to like, I thought, in Thor Ragnarok.
Mm-hmm. I did. I enjoyed watching that. And that was an absolute blast.
But Love and Thunder is honestly borderline unwatchable. Unwatchable.
You're so not kidding with that. Oh God, it was bad. It was bad on so many darn levels. Let's see. Next one we have is heisting, and of course hijacking has got a ton in there. I saw Peter Pan and Wendy. I wiped that one from my brain. That was that was an abomination. I
Masters of the Universe.
That's another one. Oh my gosh, the first one.
Gretel and Hansel. Kenobi, I would say, is a hijack with Leia taking over.
Yes, definitely was. Toy Story 4. Also, it's another one where it's like, it's on Bo Peep. I'm like, no.
Bo Peep hijacks Toy Story 4.
Mm-hmm. And it just made zero sense. But we go from hijacking to heisting, which is recentering an entire male franchise on a new female lead. And in your list, this is my biggest offender. This movie, I have such a bone to pick with this movie. How can you have Black Panther without Black Panther?
You can't.
That's the crux of the issue that I have with this film. So from what people had told me,
that's my problem.
They were like, well, Shuri, she took over the mantle of Black Panther temporarily. I'm like, okay, well, if this is a temporary thing, all right, I can deal with that. But if it's just she's the new Black Panther, we got problems. And that's what happened in this movie. She was the new Black Panther. We don't even get to see T'Challa. Supposedly some mysterious disease took him down. And then I don't know what happened in this movie. Well, I guess we do know what happened in this movie. All of that toxic male energy that I loved in Black Panther got sucked out, and Mabutu, who was probably, the most imposing figure in the first Black Panther movie, is basically like the drunk uncle. Like, okay, sure, but whatever. It's so insulting my intelligence.
I'm with you 100%. 100%. T'Challa, Chadwick Boseman's T'Challa is iconic, like immediately iconic. It didn't take a lot of time for that to age into being iconic. It pretty much happened right away, which is very difficult to pull off. Tony Stark pulled it off. Robert Downey Jr. pulled it off with Iron Man, like an instant classic right there. But so was T'Challa. And my kids dressed up. My oldest kid dressed up as Black Panther that year. So he was a great superhero. Period. His film was, I think, one of the highest grossing superhero films of all time when it came out. And so And by the way, the way he was played by Chadwick, it was so special because he brought a certain nobility to his style of superhero. He was reserved, he was noble, he was clear-headed, he would be still in one moment and slow to action, but once he committed to action, he was the most agile, the most athletic parkour superhero there was. He was fun to watch. He had such great stylized combat. So they captured lightning in a bottle with him. And so I think if you really care about that, you need to follow up. You have to recast T'Challa with another male actor.
Agreed.
Have to do it. You have to recast him, and that character's job, and you can write this right into the script. How can I ever fill his shoes? Right? He's up against it. It's impossible to fill his shoes. So in real life, this would be true. If Wakanda was real and the Black Panther was real and the Black Panther passes away and whoever this person is, whoever this guy is, has to fill these shoes, it's going to be a tall order, buddy. Write it right into the script, but let him say, I'm trying to take up this mantle and rule with that same nobility. And I think that was what made the Black Panther mantle special. And I think they needed to recast him for that.
Yeah, agreed. 100%. This film, man, it still makes me mad and I saw it the first night it came out and I did a review on it. And I was just like, no, there's even writing issues, lore contradiction issues, all kinds of stuff that was going on in that. So my brain pretty much tries to forget that this film ever existed. But on the upside, one of the films that you brought up in your list, which is one of my favorites, because I kind of did a reverse where I saw Furiosa in the theater and was like, somebody said there was this movie called Fury Road that I should see.
Yes.
And I watched it and I enjoyed this film.
Yep. Mad Max Fury Road is actually a great film. And I think, and I made my case, I think, in our last discussion, that the combination, this came out in 2015, as did Force Awakens, which is another heisted franchise. These two films came out in the same year, and Force Awakens became the highest grossing domestic box office and worldwide box office film of all time. Actually, it may not have beat Avatar. I have to double check, but at the domestic box office, #1 of all time. So there, heisted franchise, #1 box office film in history. Secondly, Charlize Theron comes in as Furiosa in Mad Max, and she boots him to the side, and she's an invented character. Boots Mad Max to the side, who's competently played by Tom Hardy. And this film still succeeded, and it was an Academy Award-winning film in multiple categories. So I think the success of Force Awakens and Fury Road is what led to the derangement in Hollywood of wanting to take everything and make it female, which I think we're making the case, simply making it female for whatever reason, using any of these tactics we're discussing isn't enough. You always have to have good writing. So I highlighted Force Awakens as well, because ultimately this is a bad film. And it's bad for its own reasons, but it's also not helped by by The Last Jedi and The Rise of Skywalker, which got worse and worse and worse, making this film useless. But it also succeeded at the box office. So it's still a mixed bag in that sense. But Fury Road, I would say, so this is a heisted franchise. This would meet that definition, and as does Mad Max Fury Road. But this one is an excellent film. I actually love watching it. The visuals are incredible. And she is, I said convincing physicality is one of those little benchmarks on the toughness. She brings it in this. She's pretty tough.
Yeah, she really is. And just the way that she's able to escape with the wives
Yes.
is I love that. That was crazy, to see just how, just how smart she was, just how capable she was. And it's like, if I die doing this, I die doing this. But I have to get you guys out of here. So
Yeah.
I enjoyed this way more than I did with Furiosa. Not that it's like Furiosa, she wasn't a girl boss.
No,
And the film
not at
was
all.
okay, but it's like it's one that no one really asked for, and they'd
Well,
already done it better.
so I did not see Furiosa at this I saw at the theater, but Furiosa I didn't see at the theater, and I saw it on streaming, and I was like you, I was like, oh my god, this is actually very watchable. In fact, it's I like it, and so I tried to I asked myself, I was like, why the f did no one go see this? Because I didn't like even using myself as an example, I didn't go see it at the theater, and I was like, well, why didn't I go see it? And I was like, well, the story of Furiosa was told. She had this big epic clash in the Mad
Mm-hmm.
Max universe, and we just witnessed it, and it was pretty epic in this film. So Furiosa's like, but how about her epic clash before that? So it's like not interesting. That's not a good premise. They should have just had a new character or something. I don't know, but a prequel that achieves essentially what the feature achieved, I think was weak and not interesting.
Exactly. Cool visuals though.
Oh yeah,
Furiosa. Like, I'm not gonna lie, those visuals were pretty
and she
stunning.
isn't the girl boss. She takes her lumps in this one, and
Oh
some of it's
yeah.
pretty rough.
Yeah. Absolutely. All right. So the next one that you have is villain praising, which is centering the show with a sympathetic take on a female villain. And you
Yes.
have one of the greatest defenders up here, which is a shame because I started out really, really liking this show, and it would be WandaVision. I could not believe how lame of an ending there was to this show. They didn't stick the landing. The aircraft
Huh.
skidded down the runway and crashed and burned when it came
They
to this.
Game of Thrones it. um,
Yes.
I love the way you just said that because it pretty much reflects exactly what happened to me. WandaVision was one of the first shows that Marvel trotted out after Endgame. They announced that they were pretty much taking all the stars from the big screen from this 10-year or 11-year 23 film masterstroke, really, the MCU, and now they're going to bring all that to streaming for free. And WandaVision was their first, and it did. It started out great. I loved their sitcom takes. I was compelled. There seemed to be a mystery, and I was really sucked into it. And then by the end of it, I had to like stop and be like, what the hell? And try to understand what it all meant. And I could not make sense of it. And in fact, the more I thought about it, the less it made sense. And the more frustrated I got at the writers for what they did with this story. I mean, she basically enslaved the whole town, and
Yes.
their answer to this was they won't understand what you went through. And I'm like, not enough. That's not an excuse. That's not an excuse.
No, I was, and it's like, and I'll die on this hill. I thought that they were going to bring Mephisto into this because she has these two kids, and I'm just like, okay, what's the price that she has to pay for those two kids? That would have introduced more conflict to the story. And it's like, okay, here's the thing. It's like you either let these kids, either let the people go or we take your kids. Something that's in there. And it wasn't that big bad that showed up. And Agatha Harkness is not the big bad. I don't know why people thought she was, but she wasn't. and you find out, like you were saying, that they don't know what you went through. It's like, okay, we enslaved all these people, and she doesn't answer for that in
No,
some kind of way. Because someone said, well, what could you do? She's the most powerful mutant. I'm just like, that does not make her infallible.
right. Well, and
What
so
if she
I,
decided to give up her kids in order to save that town?
yeah, and someone argued with me back when this was out. They're like, "Well, how come you give Anakin a free pass? Wasn't he a villain who redeemed himself?" I'm like, "A, he died after he redeemed himself, meaning if he lived, he's not celebrated. He's going to jail and possibly
Mm-hmm.
capital punishment. He'd be executed for what he's done. Uh, Lucky for him, in a sense, he died. He didn't have to face the music. And two, he killed the emperor. So he took down the Alpha
Mm-hmm.
uh, at the cost of his own life, which gives him a self-contained redemption arc. It doesn't exonerate him for what he did in the past. No one made that case, but it did give him a redemption arc, and he died in the end. She was never really redeemed and never answered for what she did. And then the characters in the show actually said it's okay. You know, you went through a tough time, and so what you did, I guess, is essentially justifiable on some level. And that's not true. So structurally, you had two villains, her and Agatha. They should have either had Agatha imprisoning her and make her the victim, or make
Mm-hmm.
her a bona fide villain. And hey, come at me. You know, like if you don't like what I did, I changed my mind about it. You don't like it, come at me. And let her just throw her gauntlet out there. But they they landed somewhere in the middle, and it was not good.
No, they completely wussed down on this. And as a comic book fan, it really aggravated me because I actually have a couple of comics with the Scarlet Witch in
Mm.
it. And I'm like, okay, do we get to see how she turns into, the Scarlet Witch? This is what I was waiting for because she was, quote unquote, the most powerful mutant. I thought we were going to see that. And instead, we get this, oh, it's okay. We're just going to watch you walk by and just give you, nasty looks. And it was so bad. I'm just like, the way you started off so strong
Uh,
and you didn't really truly solve the mystery. It was, oh gosh,
right.
it's bad.
Yeah. I mean, and so yeah, and the problem I have with the praising of villains is it becomes morally questionable. Like, who are these writers that think they have discovered some sort of new ethical system, and everything that's
Hmm.
bad is good and good is bad? It makes me worry for the writers who think that they have bypassed the ethical problem.
Right, which brings me to this movie, Cruella. I had such a huge problem um, with this film. That's the wannabe fake Anna Wintour right right there.
Yeah,
But with this film, it's just, I'm like, why should we be made to feel sympathetic for a woman who we know wanted a coat made out of the pelts of puppies?
that's
All
like
right.
killing John Wick's dog. Like, you don't recover from that.
Yes. Yes. You just you don't. And if you've ever gone back, and I tell people, watch the 1990s version with Glenn Close, where you get that crazy, just like evil what's going on, and you balance that with, this family who's trying to protect, these puppies, and when they get, kidnapped, and the parents, Pongo and Perdita, just how inconsolable they are and how mad we are. We're just like, you have to go, we have to go, we have to, get these puppies. And just the dogs that have like
Yeah,
this little communication chain going on of, have you seen, these puppies, and all of that. And at the end, we see what happens with Cruella. But I don't get this, uh how would I say it, villain worship. It's one thing to see them from the beginning through to their demise, but to try to get us to sympathize with them, I have a big problem with that.
Well, there's a line of thought that says there is no good and evil, and that evil is needs to be understood and has some logic to it, and it's like, no, there's evil in the world, absolutely, unequivocally evil things, and our job is to figure out what led people there so that we don't ever do that. What we don't want to do is say, well, maybe that atrocity, there's some reasoning behind it. Careful with that, because you're breaking down an ethical barrier that should not be broken down. So villains are villains for a reason, even the ones we like.
Mm-hmm.
And to spend time trying to heroize the villains, I think, is questionable at best and misguided.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's also another reason why I tell people, like, I'm a big horror fan of horror movies, and I find out that the horror movies that depict, like, there's no real good and evil, it's just kind of in the middle, those are the most boring horror movies to watch. The movies that have just unspeakable evil in it that needs to be overcome, like The Exorcist, one I just watched last night called Sinister, Insidious, films like that. Yeah. Definitely Poltergeist. That show, pure unadulterated evil. And yeah, those do the best. Those are the ones that I'm interested in. The ones where we're trying to understand who. No, I don't want to understand. I mean, I don't care, and it like takes away from it, and it's kind of like, yeah, okay, whatever. I'm just
one way to do it is have the villain make their case, like Thanos. A lot of people like Thanos because he makes this case, and I've had friends be like, Thanos, had a point. It's like, right, but it cost trillions of lives. It's like, oh yeah, can't do that. So it's interesting if your villain can make their case for their actions and almost make it like reasonable on some level, but not all the way. You just can't go all the way with it like that. So good villains make their case and make the best case possible, but your job is to still oppose that person with your life if necessary.
Exactly. And it's almost like this film, Maleficent. Yep. Like, Maleficent is one of my favorite old school Disney villains. If you go back and you watch Sleeping Beauty, just how evil she is. So I'm like, okay, this is great. We're gonna find out how she got there, and all just the messed up stuff that she did, and we're going to get to see this. And that's not what we got in this. We're supposed to feel bad for her because she lost her wings. And I'm just like, no, it's not what I wanted to see, or what I was interested in seeing.
Right. Now, I actually didn't mind this movie. In fact, I kind of liked it. But at the end of it, the part that I still can't get comfy with is that what they really did was use the name Maleficent, because the Maleficent in the cartoon, in the original film, she's just bad news. So what they really did is revamped her as a new character, really, that has a more understandable storyline. That I don't like. But if you just step back and watch it and pretend she's not attached to it on some level, it was easier to watch, and some parts of it were actually quite good. But again, I'm not into, like, if I had to choose to watch a film, I probably am not going to choose Maleficent. There's a million films I'd rather watch.
Yeah. Like the first Despicable Me movie.
Yes. Yeah, there you go.
Who would have thought that you would have this villain who adopts these three girls just so he can kind of go undercover, but eventually comes to love these girls and protect them. So that kind of story, I'm like, oh, okay, I'm good with something
Well,
like that happening.
yeah, and the gag there, he's kind of he's like not even a good comic book villain. He's like an over the top, stealing the pyramids and and replacing it with an inflatable. Like these are ridiculous. And the whole thing is he's not really despicable. He's actually kind of a big old softy.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I like that one. Let's see. Well, let's see. Next one we're just sailing through these. I love these. So we have villain shipping. One we already talked about was Rings of Power.
Yeah.
And
this is
another one.
Yeah, this is a new phenomenon where heroines begin developing relationship with classic villains. So freaking weird. I mean, I think this is an extension of the villain praising. Now that we've made the case that villains are okay, now you're getting our heroines like falling for them. And it's like, whoa, we're really starting to get questionable here ethically.
Yeah, I tried to explain to some folks, and I still have not hit play on this movie. I don't know if I ever will watch this film, but to see people be excited about a relationship with Rey, you had Raylo down here, Rey, and then with Kylo Ren, a dude who killed his own father.
Yeah.
How can you reconcile that, and how can you sell that? It's not like it was an accidental death. Like he messed up and the lightsaber got away from him and he's just like carrying this burden around like people think I killed my father and then I killed my father. It's like, no, he actually did. He took him out.
He murdered him. Unarmed.
Exactly.
Han Solo was unarmed. They weren't like dueling with lightsaber in a lightsaber battle and he wins. Han Solo gave himself up. He loved his son, and then Kylo just runs them through. And I heard this great. I think Chris Gore gave a great discussion of Han Solo tumbling into the abyss after that, and he's like, falling into abyss is how the villain dies. That's how villains die in so many stories, and he's right. There's a million examples, and that's how Han Solo went. So terrible treatment, and then your lead heroine, your girl boss, kind of into this guy. She kisses him even. By the way, I don't know if you haven't seen it, then you don't know. She kisses Kylo Ren on the mouth in Rise of Skywalker. Gives him like a little, cutesy peck on the lips, and I'm like, that's so weird because you haven't really, if you haven't really committed to the relationship in this, but you've been messing with it the whole time, and now the trilogy's over. And then there's that really weird scene, I think, in the Last Jedi, where they're like, his shirt's off, and she's like force texting him, and then they're like doing some sort of like seance, even though they're like galaxies apart, or systems apart. They're like touching, like, I don't know, it looked like Luke comes in there and it was like a parent who's busting his kid making out with her boyfriend.
I don't know if there's enough wine in the world for me to get through this.
Honestly,
movie.
Lorena, it's not worth watching. It's incoherent, and everything that's bad about The Last Jedi. Now, the only thing that's good about it is it mostly rejects The Last Jedi, but that's not good enough to make it a good film. It's really bad, actually.
Yeah, that's what I heard. People are just like, nah, they're like, nah, just go buy it. But it's like, if you thought that Star Wars property was bad, oh my gosh, The Acolyte.
Yep. Oh my God. Yep. Worst Star Wars ever written. This is another one that goes into the villain shipping category, where you introduce the lead female girl boss. a top, big dog character, female lead, and she starts digging the bad guy, and not just like the bad guy on the motorcycle. She's just into the bad boy thing. He's a Sith, so this is like a professional serial killer.
Mm-hmm.
And she's trying to develop a relationship with him. Like she's trying to, the premise of the Acolyte is like the Jedi made mistakes, which by the way is already the premise of the prequels, right? The Jedi are imperfect, they made mistakes, but in the Acolyte, they make mistakes that are hard to understand, covering up some atrocity that when you break it down, it's parts of it were mishaps that were almost understandable the way it was written. And then the Sith are introduced, and she's digging the Sith. And it's like, because the Jedi commit atrocities. And it's like, well, is that really what the Jedi Order stands for? Committing atrocities? Because the Sith, by the way, end up creating the Death Star, blow up entire planets. They commit more atrocities than anybody in the history of the galaxy. So it's odd that this character would fall in love with a Sith, someone who's known for this.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I had stopped watching The Acolyte after I think episode 4 or something like that. I said, I can't put myself through this. But when I heard at the end, I think I guessed, I'm like, oh, you know what? It's probably going to wind up being that other dude. And sure enough, it was.
Yeah. She's digging the Sith Lord guy.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. It's a weird way to portray female empowerment. And again, the writing is morally ambiguous, but not in a good writing way. It's almost like the writer themselves is morally confused, and that confusion ended up in the screenplay. And now you've got your supposed girl boss on the side of on the dark side, like legitimately, and not in a cool way, like in a poorly written way.
Mm-hmm. Well, speaking of stuff that looks like it's poorly written, even though we haven't seen the movie yet, that would be Snow White.
So this is the final category, isn't it?
I think it's in the same one. Let me see.
No, this is a different category. This is what I call anti-heroine.
Thank you. Yes, there we go. Anti-heroine. Thank you. Which you say overt feminist takes of an existing female character with misandry overtones.
Right. Where there is, and I mean overt modern feminist takes, meaning almost detached, taking an existing character that was successful, by the way. Snow White is a successful character, and saying that there's something wrong with her, that we can't appreciate her for the time she was in. We must go back and address this. And they address it so heavy-handedly that it comes across as shallow and a little anti-male and a little anti-heroine, meaning it's almost against the original heroine. And if you listen to Rachel Zegler, some of the things she says about, she's not looking for true love. She doesn't meet the prince. The prince is a stalker. Like, that doesn't sound very endearing to me. And I think she's losing a lot of the audience by talking like that. And it sounds anti-Snow White. So that's what I mean by anti-heroine. You're anti the heroine by trying to reinvent her in this new perspective. Yeah, and this one, we haven't seen it yet, so I think we do have to give it some leeway.
Yeah, it's like we don't know what's going to happen, but I will say with looking at the trailer, and in my brain, I'm remembering the 1937 version. I don't remember the dwarves having to clean up or needed her direction in order for them to do that. So I'm just like, let's see. I'm going to see what happens because I got to review it. But to me, that takes away a fundamental part of the story, especially with Snow White being a heroine, because she comes across this, the animals actually lead her to this cottage because they know she'll be safe there. And she
Right.
gets there and notices there are dishes in the sink, there's clothes all over the place, and she's like, okay, well, I found this place. Well, you know, let me clean up. And she sees that there's, you know, a bunch of like tourists who live there. So she spends all this time cleaning the place up because, you know, she wants to be respectful. She's, you know, encroaching on their, you know, on their property. So eventually the dwarves find her, you know, and see what she's done. And they're like, okay, well, you know, just you can go and stay. There's that respect there where they're just like, okay, well, if you're going to clean the house and all that stuff, you need to stay safe, all of that while, you know, while we go to the mine and everything. But in the trailer, there's just something about it. And again, I don't want to judge something before it happens, but when I see that obvious deviation, it gives me a lot of pause.
Yeah, well, there's a lot of concern leading up to this, a lot of based on what the actress said herself about what this is about. You know, Snow White, who doesn't give two S's about the prince. Now you're out of the spirit of Snow White. Now you're deviating to a degree that makes this not really Snow White. You know, how she's going to be this great leader. You know, that wasn't what Snow White was about. If you want to tell a story about a medieval young woman like this who ends up being a great leader, then write something original. You know, it's not like it can't happen. I'm writing a story about a real woman who's in the medieval era who becomes a leader. So it's not like it doesn't happen, but it didn't. That wasn't the point behind Snow White. And so you that's why I call it anti-heroine. The story is it appears to be anti-Snow White. So, you know, you've come full circle. You've come from, you know, maybe redoing a character or adding a female character to taking good, successful female characters and now creating stories that go against those female characters. And I guarantee this is not going to do well. I can safely make that prediction.
Yeah, I would agree with you. It's just not, even despite the CGI CGI dwarves they're going to bring in there. Another one, and this is a movie that got on my radar from what people came back and told me. Terminator Dark Fate.
Hated this movie. Hated it. I got early screenings to go see this. And I wrote it and I had to blast it. So anti-heroine, meaning anti-Sarah Connor. They portrayed this as a pro-Sarah Connor movie. It's Linda Hamilton's return. And I love Linda Hamilton, and I love her portrayal of Sarah Connor. Her portrayal of Sarah Connor, especially in part 2, one of my favorite all-time heroines of all time. And this movie is anti-Sarah Connor. It actually takes up some of the plot lines and purpose, especially when in regards to her maternal instinct, and trashes it. The movie opens up with a CGI deep fake of T2, Terminator 2 Sarah Connor, you know, in the sleeveless tank top with the bangs and the ponytail.
Yeah.
And a Terminator like comes out and shoots and kills John Connor. Terminator 2 out the window. She failed. Couldn't have. I felt sitting in the theater a thrill at looking at a new take on of T2 Sarah Connor. It's like they brought her back to life for a second. And then they killed John Connor, and I was like, what the heck? Like, what is that? And then the rest of the movie was terrible. It wasn't pro Sarah Connor. She had to compete with the other lead actress. There was 2 other lead actresses, and all 3 were competing for attention and screen time. And some of the comments in the dialogue were so overtly anti-Sarah Sarah Connor that I couldn't believe it made it into this film. And it also showed a lack of understanding of who Sarah Connor is and what she's actually fighting for. There was an entire thing about, oh, your value isn't because you're pregnant and you're going to give birth to, they literally say, some man. like just disgusted with the concept of giving birth to a man. And they're like, that's not your purpose. And I thought to myself, whoever wrote this is insane, because that was never Sarah Connor's purpose. I think any woman who has a child, or 99%, would defend their child if threatened. That whether he was a tax accountant or a server at a McDonald's, doesn't matter. You're going to defend the kid. Sarah Connor isn't just trying to save John Connor, her unborn child. When she's having dreams and nightmares, she's dreaming of nuclear Armageddon. She's trying to save all of us, all of humanity. She's trying to save when she's trying to escape the Terminator. So to reduce her in dialogue from the perspective that she's just a vessel for a man says a lot more about the writers of this apparently feminist take than it does about Sarah Connor. What did you think about it?
I have to admit, when this film came out and I was thinking about seeing it, some friends went to see it before I did. And when I heard what happened to John Connor, my question was that a dream sequence or something? Because we've seen Sarah Connor have these, dreams of the future or what could possibly happen but didn't happen. I'm like, that was a flash. That was like a dream or something, right? Or it turned out to be just somebody with John Connor's face, but it wasn't really John Connor. They said no. They murked John Connor.
Yep.
I'm like, that makes no sense to me. Sarah Connor did everything to keep John Connor alive because she used to give him crap about, you can't just waste your life. There's too many people, who depend on you. And was it T2? Was it T3? I think it was T2 when John Connor was saying, my mom, she would hook up with this guy, this guy, stuff they could tell me. One was like, was a really commando and teach me how to do all this stuff because she thinks I'm going to be some great leader or something like that one day. Right. And of course, Schwarzenegger character's like, yeah, you kind of are. But then you notice that there's all of this. Sarah's so invested in keeping him alive that she's a different kind of mother. She's not the touchy-feely mother, I'd say, so to speak.
Right.
But she loves, exactly. She's tough love and she loves her son. And we know it's like he has to survive. If he doesn't survive, humanity doesn't survive. And Sarah Connor saw it as, her contribution, so to speak, was that she gave birth to this child. And I'm trying to remember which movie it was where she was giving somebody a ration of crap about they thought they had created something. Oh, no. That was when they ran into the creator Skynet. She's like, you think you create something. You say, try to create life. Oh. And protect it and watch it. And she started going off and
she started getting ticked.
She's like, Mom, dial it back. But we get it. To her, the most important thing to her was her son, was John Connor. And we knew that too.
Well, but my point was, I think a lot of mothers would love their son to an extreme degree. Or their daughter. Doesn't matter. Right? You're going to love your daughter. You're going to love your son. What really motivates Sarah, what kicked up the maternal instinct to the most maximum level, is that not only if her son dies is it terrible because her son died, which, whatever mother is out there, they would be grief stricken for the rest of their life. Not not only is that bad enough, all of humanity or most of humanity is destroyed. That's the no tolerance line. She rises to this. Okay, when she's trying to fight the Terminator, when she's trying to escape, especially in Terminator 1, where John's not even there yet, she is motivated to protect humanity. So she's fighting for me and you, not just John. She has the sacred flame of humanity in her hand, and she is fighting tooth and nail to keep that ablaze. And that's why all of us like her. I think the people that reduce her to say that she's a worthless person who has no purpose except to be a vessel for a man, that's a shallow take. That's the shallow take. And they wrote it into this script and ruined it. They anti-hero and anti-Sarah Connored her.
They totally did. And it's funny that you should mention the Terminator, because I want to say a couple weeks ago I was watching Despicable Me 4. I don't know if you've seen that yet.
I have. It's great. We loved it.
The part where they are in the supermarket. And the lady who Lucy screwed her hair up started coming after, like the Terminator, just like, get in the car, we gotta go. I'm like, am I hearing the Terminator music? And sure enough, it was like the same thing. And I had to laugh, but at the same time, that was the thing. Saving the future from this like killing machine. It doesn't sleep, doesn't stop. And the fact that they would drop that in that film, I mean, kids could get it from the point of, okay, Bob's protecting me from the really, really crazy lady coming after us, to adults who've seen Terminator like, oh, okay, yeah, I get that. But yeah,
but it shows how timeless that conflict was between Sarah and the T-1000. Here we are in 2024, and there's still being parodies for a younger generation, and even they like it. So, and my kids have seen Terminator 2, and they loved it. So, unfortunately, this anti-heroine version of Terminator was bad and failed, and will go into the dustbin of nonsense. And T2 will live on, and so will Sarah Connor's legacy.
Exactly. Well, the last one that you have is original stories. Now, new stories with original female leads that were successful. And you have one listed that is one of my favorites, and I can't wait for season 2. That would be Arcane.
Oh. So this is my advocacy. Leave original IPs alone. Leave them alone. Partnering, twin sistering, hijacking, leave them alone. Write us something new. You have a new take on a heroine. You want to show us what a cool heroine can look like. Come up with a new name, come up with a new character, come up with a new franchise. And that's exactly what Arcane did. And she's LGBT. She's awesome in every way that I love heroines to be awesome. She's tough. She's compassionate. She's everything. She gets her butt kicked sometimes. She kicks butt sometimes. I'm a huge fan of this show for multiple reasons. And the lead heroine, she's a girl boss, and she delivers. And I cannot wait for season 2. How did you come into Arcane?
Someone had recommended it to me. So I was like, I don't know what I want to watch. And someone said, oh, you should check out Arcane. So I watched it, and I was so sucked into the story, especially as I'm an older sister. So that's something that I can immediately relate to. So it's like the whole LGBTQ thing that came later. And I had no problem with that, because the characters were already established up front, and you already had an emotional connection to them. So all of that was just extra stuff added on. But we're so invested in these characters and what happens to them in this world that's created. I thoroughly enjoyed it. I enjoyed it so much, I did a review of it on my on my channel with a bunch of other people. It was probably like not too long after this first season had come out. I'd never played League of Legends.
Neither have I.
And even without playing it, I thoroughly enjoyed watching this. So yeah,
Yeah,
I was
so
like,
this is
thank
another
you for the recommendation.
yeah, this was a show that had diversity. It had a female lead who was tough and kicked ass. And it completely succeeds, and not just succeeds, but I would say succeeds at the highest levels. The animation was cool, the music was cool, the side characters were cool, the plot lines were interesting, the world building was immersive. Like, you can go through almost every category of storytelling and find an A+ sitting there for you with
Hmm.
Arcane. So I loved it, and I was proud. So now Vi is and by the way, I like Jinx Powder. Um,
Hmm.
she's a some people say that she's a derivative of the manic pixie girl or anything, and maybe she is, but she still works, and I still am engaged with her character, and I think they did her particularly well. So you can have tough chicks. This argument that men and women don't like tough women is not true. We like tough women. We just don't like your poorly written ones. you know?
Yeah. Yeah. Give us something that we can relate to. Give us something that makes us care about about these characters. It's like with one English teacher that I had, the English literature, when we were like writing stories, it's like, why should I care to keep reading with visual medium? Why should I care to keep watching? You
Right.
need to give me a reason, to care. And they did this very, very well with Arcane.
Oh man.
Another one that you have listed, which I have not finished watching yet, and that would be Blue Eye Samurai.
I love this one. She is interesting. So here's a character who's androgynous. Okay. She is kind of like Mulan in that she's a woman. She dresses herself and disguises herself as kind of a man, but
Hmm.
has a very androgynous look. And she goes on, and she's bullied and everything. And so I didn't know if this was going to work for me or not. I love this character. She's very OP, which usually is not good. She's very
Hmm.
tough. She's over the top with her combat,
Yeah.
but she gets hurt a lot in this too. The injuries she sustains have real consequences. She doesn't just bounce back from them.
Hmm.
The battles go back and forth with her, in the lead, then her backing down, then the other person, they kind of go back and forth. So if you haven't seen Blue-Eyed Samurai or Blue Eye Samurai, check it out. It's not as good as Arcane, but it reminded me of it because it's animated and it was very well written. So
Hmm.
she's a great heroine.
Okay. Because I've seen, I want to say, oh my gosh, I think I have like 4 episodes or so
Yeah.
into it, and I hadn't quite made a judgment yet. But I agree, she was very overpowered. It was more of like, huh, okay, I'll come
Yeah.
back and watch the rest. It wasn't like, I don't want to ever watch this again. No, it was just more of like,
Yeah.
okay,
You weren't turned off by it yet.
no, it's just kind of, kind of like there. But I love the premise, especially when she will say her mentor turns out he's blind, and the stuff
Yes.
that she does in order to be able to stay there. I thought that was very cool how they put that together. So everyone's told me this is a good watch. So I'm probably gonna have to and go back and finish watching
It,
this
it, it
one.
is really good.
Sure.
And again, I appreciate it. It's a new character. They didn't steal an IP. And she stands in her own space and goes on her own quest. And so I applaud them. They delivered a real heroine, and that's what we need. We need some new stuff.
Absolutely, we do need some new stuff. But speaking of new, but not quite new, but new to other people, like I know it was new to me,
Yeah.
and that would be House of the Dragon. I love this show, although season two, could have been much
So
better than it was, but
retro, yeah, retro nerd girl and I talked about this, and she knows the story, so she's optimistic for because she knows what's going to happen. And she has told me and assured like her listeners, she's assured us, like, don't give up on it. It's like we're right on the cusp of incredibleness. And I agree with her. My take was, I know a little bit about the background, and I know there was a budget constraint and everything. Now, that doesn't forgive the rather anticlimactic and slower season 2. Season 2 was definitely a dip. Season 1 I thought was really good. Season 2 was a dip, except for episode 4, which was phenomenal. But I can't lie, I was very disappointed with how the season went for the most part, and how it ended, specifically how it ended. I was willing to put up with the slowness because I just assumed we'd have this huge finale. And while watching the finale, I had to like check the bottom to see how much time was left. And I was like, we're going to run out the clock on season 2.
Yeah.
I was like, oh man. So I do think season 3 is going to be great. And I think we'll all forgive and forget season 2 once season 3 comes out.
For considering I didn't read the books, but I have the audio book because I said I was gonna listen to it, and I know other people who've read the books and everything. I just enjoyed watching this. The characters were original. The female characters, they weren't, men suck, blah blah blah, this that, and the other thing. They had a very symbiotic relationship, especially I want to say in season 1, where Rhaenyra's like entertaining potential suitors, and she's just like, I'm so over this, I'm so tired of this. And I'm forgetting the guy's name, but he was really young. And he's going through his spiel and people are giving him crap, especially this one guy. And he's like, I'm going to keep going. And Rhaenyra's just like, she could tell. It's like, now that was a point where they could have tried to cut this character down. But she was just basically like, you're a little young for me. Although I appreciate what you're trying to do. And then eventually this dude had enough that we thought that he had been killed, but it turns out he prison shanked the guy that was giving him crap. And she kind of looked like, okay, still too young for me, but okay. I loved how they handled that. So that was one of the things that helped me buy into watching this. So
yes,
it looks like a lot's coming with season 3. Season 2 is nowhere near the dumpster fire that was season 8 of Game of Thrones.
Right. Totally agree. Season 8 was really bad, and I picked up on it after the first episode. I was like, that was actually so season 8 is famously franchise ending. Season 2 for House of the Dragon was just anticlimactic and a little slower, which, like I said, that's going to be forgivable with a great season 3, which I do think we'll get. But in line with our conversation, it's heroine-centric. This is a heroine-centric television show. You have two, like even in the poster, it's, two females, the blacks and the greens in terms of the factions. And, people take sides. And I like both of these women. I'm starting to like Rhaenyra a little bit more. I feel like Alicent's is kind of losing her grip and making some questionable overtures of peace. But these are well, and by the way, they were well acted by two sets of actresses. You had the younger girl actresses playing these two characters, and then they replaced them with like women actresses. Both of them did great.
They did. Millie Alcock as young Rhaenyra. I loved her.
Yes.
Oh my gosh.
She was great.
She was just amazing. Yeah, she was amazing. I missed her. I'm like, man, I'm so gonna miss her. But the character has to grow up. But yes, it's very heroine centric. This was one of those when it was first announced. I did hear rumblings about, is this another female-centric thing that they came up with? And book readers were like, no, this is the premise of the entire book. And this is the reason why the realm gets thrown into chaos, because you have people in the realm who will not accept a woman on the Iron Throne.
Correct.
And with the history of the Targaryens, knowing that, Rhaenyra is actually one of the ancestors of, I believe, Aegon the Conqueror. So the fact that that's in the line of succession, and this is not something that someone came up with on the fly, that this was something that had been established already from a well-venerated author to begin with, people were more able to accept this, especially when it comes as it's but compared to Rings of Power. So this is actually a very, very good example of when some people found out that it's like, okay, this has been out there for a while. All right, I'm kind of willing to give it a chance, as opposed to seeing Rings of Power and like, no, Karen Galadriel, not for me.
Right. Well, and there's so in the first season, I think her name is Rhaenyra, right? The older woman who got passed over. She's only died.
That's Rhaenys.
Rhaenys, that's right. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
By the way, I love her too. She is a great actress in this. What's interesting is, so she gets passed up for the throne, and I think a lot of people these days can be guarded, like, oh God, are we going to get some monologue about how unfair the world is or whatever? But what was interesting is it was unfair, and she didn't like it, but she still maintained relationships with men. And that's one of my main things is, whether you're a hero or you're a heroine, you're going to have to learn how to have relationships, professional or romantic or whatever, with members of the opposite sex. And I think it is an essential skill set for all of us. So if there's a male character or a male hero who trashes women all the time and never has any inkling to have a relationship constructive with, we're not going to like him either. And there's very few examples of that. That's why we don't like some of these women who seem like they don't have any interest in a relationship, professional or otherwise, with members of the opposite sex. I think that's a mistake, and I think it's not something that most people relate to. I think at the end of the day, it's important to have relationships with people who aren't like yourself, and that's a skill, and it's an important skill. And your heroes and heroines should have this skill on some level.
100%. Absolutely. Absolutely. My goodness, that was such an exhaustive list, but I think a very necessary list, especially showing the bad examples and the good examples as well. So, Douglas, I want to thank you for putting those together. I'm pretty sure I learned some stuff, so I'm hoping you folks out there have definitely learned something. Anything you want to say in conclusion to summarize all of these personalities?
Well, just briefly, that I think you're doing a good thing by aiming this way. That it's one thing to be critical of poorly written heroines or poor portrayals of female leads or characters, but we don't want to lose sight of what we really love, which are well-written, great characters. And in this discussion specifically, great heroines. Like, we still want that, and we have a big appetite for that. And hopefully Hollywood will start delivering some good heroines for all of us.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, Douglas, where can people find you out here on these interwebs?
You can find me. My website is a good starting place, douglasaburton.com. It's got some of the things about the books I've written there. There's a really cool video on the homepage about the Heroine's Labyrinth to give you some introduction of what that's all about. You could find me on Twitter or X at Douglas A. Burton, and I also do have a Facebook page under my author name as well. So, but if you are interested in heroines, grab a copy of the Heroine's Labyrinth. It not only analyzes patterns of archetypal patterns and heroine-centric stories with tons of examples, it will help. It's specifically meant to help you as a writer organize your story around patterns found in heroine-centric tales. So it's an appreciation of heroines.
Well, that is awesome. And folks, I would interview Douglas about his book, but you know what? Retro Nerd Girl did a much better job. So definitely check out her interview with Douglas over on her channel. So
That was
in the description box, there's a link to Doug's website, also a link to his profile on X. So please do follow him. He's got some amazing, amazing takes on writing and pop culture. So you will not be disappointed whatsoever. So that's going to wrap it up for this episode of An Audience with the Queen. I know it's going over a little long, but we've got a lot of information and a lot of chapters, so you can kind of skip around.
All right.
To see which portion or which personality that you're like, well, that's why that movie's that way, or like that. So
Yeah.
let us know in the comments how you enjoyed the show. Give us a thumbs up, got some value out of it. Make sure you're subscribed to me. Make sure you're following Douglas over on X, and we will see you next time. And thanks so much for joining me again.
Well, thanks so much for having me on, Lorena. I love talking to you, and this has been a blast. And I haven't seen this conversation like this yet. So I feel like you did a great thing.
All right. Well, thank you. Thank you. You helped me out. All right, folks. Take care. Thanks so much for watching, and we'll see you in the next one. Bye.
Bye-bye.